Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Next Bite of Life podcast. My name is Kem Kem. Today, my guest is Cristina Hoag, and she is just a force by herself. She's a journalist, she's an author, she's a world traveler. I mean, she's a third culture kid. She's got it all, and she's going to talk to us all about it today. How you doing, Cristina?
Good, good. How are you, Kim Kim?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on the show because I was really excited to talk to you. Now, I always start by asking, where are you now presently?
I am in Santa Monica, California, United States, and it's right next to Los Angeles. So, for all intents and purposes, I'm in LA.
Oh my God. I used to live right on 12th Street.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No. Wow. I live on 17th Street.
Oh
So
my God. It's a small world. I was
that
reading,
is a small world.
she lives in LA. I wonder where. And I see like we have some parallels because I know you lived in Boston at some point, right? I
Yes.
was all like, oh my God, I lived in Boston and now, I lived in LA. And reading some of the things that you have accomplished, I was all like, oh my God, this is so weird. Reading about her, it's been really wonderful. But let's start from the beginning. Okay. Your dad is from New Zealand, right?
Right.
And your mom is English.
Right.
So tell me, how did it come about? Where were you born? And, tell us about some of the places that you grew up in.
Yeah. Well, as you said, my parents were from opposite sides of the world, and they actually met in Africa in what was then called Northern Rhodesia, now called Zambia, post independence. And they met in a fairly remote copper mining town. There's in that part of Africa, there's a huge, it's called the Copper Belt, and there's a lot of copper mines around there. And it was called Muffalero, still is Muffalero. There's still the huge mine, copper mine there. It's about 12 miles from the Congo border. And so my father was a mining engineer. He was a foreman at the mine, and my mother was a nurse at the hospital, the mine hospital there. And that's where they met and married. And I was almost born there. I probably should have been born there, but at the last minute, my parents left Zambia and went to New Zealand, where I was born. And then 3 weeks later, we were on the move to Fiji, to a gold mine in a town on one of the main Fijian island. And then we went to Sweden, and then England, and then Nigeria.
Yay, Nigeria! I'm from Nigeria
Oh,
originally.
okay. That's funny.
See what I was saying?
Another
Yeah,
crossroads,
exactly.
another intersection. Yeah, we lived in Lagos for a couple years. It was really, unfortunately, before my memory started. But and then we moved to New Zealand, and this was all due to my father's career and his job and what have you, with a Swedish multinational mining equipment company.
Yeah.
So then we went to New Zealand. We were there about 4 years, and then to Australia for about 5, 6 years, and then to the United States, to New Jersey specifically, and that's where I went to high school. Yeah, so it was. Right now, LA is the longest place I've ever lived anywhere. I've been here 12 years, and so this is sort of I've established it as my base.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just amazing. How was it like moving so frequently? Like, as a kid, was it an exciting thing for you, or did you go, oh my God, not again?
It was really more of an exciting thing. It was just, we grew up traveling a lot because also we were always traveling to see family, whether in New Zealand or in Australia, in England. So, and it was an exciting thing. And I remember when we were moving from Sydney, because I was older then, I was almost 13, to the US, and it seemed exciting, because we'd watched American TV shows and Disneyland and the Brady Bunch and things like that. Of course, it was, not Disneyland when we
Yeah.
got there. And it was a very hard adjustment. But yeah, I'd say it was pretty exciting. I love traveling, and I still do. And so, but it has had, good pluses and minuses, I would say.
Yeah. So you started out like when you said, most of your formative years were in New Jersey and you went to high school there and everything. Did you at that point think, I'm ready to go out there by myself again? And, because you were a journalist, how did that come about where you segued from like living there to like, I gotta go out and start doing this and, writing and going? Like, how did the
Yeah,
change?
well, one of my one passion is reading and writing, and that was, I think, one of the ways I coped with all the moves was I was just a bookworm. I just loved books, and I would just read and read. And so I wanted to write books as a little girl. And then in high school, I discovered journalism and with the high school newspaper. So I thought, oh, this is it. I can travel and write with this. I can be a foreign correspondent. So that was sort of my dream. And then I went to college, university, Boston University. That's the Boston bit.
My sister
And
went there.
oh, okay,
See you, yeah.
yeah, BU.
Uh-huh.
And then went back to New Jersey and started working at newspapers. But it became, I was always very restless. And at points I considered whether I should go back to Australia for university or England. And I never did because my family was there. And it just seemed like that was all I had. When you travel a lot like that, that's all you have. You don't have a lot of extended family or lifelong friends or anything. So I didn't move. So I stayed in New Jersey for about 5 years, and I just became too restless, and I was bored with covering sort of local. I worked for local, smallish newspapers, and so I quit, and that's when I went traveling again. And for 10 years, I lived in Spain, Guatemala, and Venezuela. And I got into being sort of a foreign correspondent and finally realizing my dream, as a girl. And yeah, and it was great. I traveled all
That's
over
so.
Latin America.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know I read somewhere that you absolutely loved Enid Blyton when you were young, and that was my favorite author. I mean, like,
Oh, really?
yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be, a detective or a novelist, and then I grew up and I segued from like Enid Blyton type of books into more like Jackie Collins. I wanted to be like the
Uh,
next top-born, writer in the world. And so I was really fascinated when I read your bio. I'm like, oh my God, you've led my life. I just so love it. I mean, I love anybody who has a passion for travel and to be able to report. Now, I read some of the amazing things that, you know, you had to dress up as a nun, like you dressed up as a nun to get into a prison, like for an interview.
well, it's a bit of I had to pose when I went into this. I couldn't get into. I was doing a report for a human rights magazine on the prison conditions in Venezuela, and there was one jail in particular I needed to get into. It was like the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
So I applied for permission, official government permission to go in, and they said we cannot guarantee your safety. So no.
Yeah.
Now I really want to get in.
Exactly.
So a journalist friend of mine said, I know a nun who goes in there, on a frequent basis to minister to the prisoners or what have you. So I called her up and she said, yeah, I can take you in. And I said, do I have to dress as, in a habit? And she said, no, I just wear jeans and a t-shirt. So that's what I wore. But I did have to say I was a nun, which at one point towards the end of the visit, end of sort of a harrowing day, this guy, I was asking a lot of questions and this prisoner sort of looks at me, he's like, you wouldn't be a journalist, would you? You're asking so many questions. And I was like,
just a
no.
curious nun.
Yes, that's what I said. I said, yeah, I'm just trying to get, as much information as I can, to take back. And he's like,
Wow.
But I was like, wow, he really cottoned on quickly.
Exactly.
And
I would have been terrified.
I know, it was kind of like, So after that, I said to the nun, I said, I think I've got enough information,
Exactly. It's like, thank you very much. Now you've had to interview some very, shady, I won't say dangerous, or did you have to interview some dangerous characters? And for anybody listening to the show, watch it. Cristina has like written for Newsweek and Times and the big magazines and the Houston Chronicle. And you've had like your resume is quite extensive, and I'm just like stunned. And I want to find out like every story that you wrote because I find it so fascinating. So tell me some of the most harrowing ones that people that you had to interview. Like, what would you say? Who was the worst one or the shadiest?
That was probably the jail. That was the one where I felt the most, sort of on the edge of danger.
Let me check my pants.
I know. It was like, ooh. There was another incident in that jail visit where I had these two guys said, "Oh, we want to show you down in the basement. There's a broken water pipe." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So off I go. And, we're down in this basement. No one's there. And of course, it was true. The water pipe was broken. There was all this black water, just wastewater just flowing out. It
Oh
was
my God.
terrible. But then I noticed the guy had in his uh, the back of his jeans a long sort of metal stick, and I said, "Oh, what's that for?" And he drew it out, and it was he said this was a bed leg, and it was sharpened to a point, and that was his
Oh
weapon,
my God.
what they called a chuso.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm thinking, why am I here? I'm alone with two. If I screamed for help, nobody's going to hear me.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
And even if they did, they're not going to come and get me.
No,
This is the
they're not.
place. They're just going to be like, "Er." So I was like, I better just, keep calm. I said, "Well, now I've seen it. Let's go back upstairs and,
Exactly.
go back to the nun, whatever her name was.
Yeah, put your thing back in your back pocket,
I know. I was like, I think,
Wow.
all
No,
of a sudden
I
I'm
would,
like, what am I doing here?
yeah,
This is,
it's like, I got
I
my
mean,
story.
right, right. So it was a very harrowing day. Another time I went in Nicaragua up into the mountains with some a demining commission. A lot of mines were left there from the Civil War in Nicaragua, and they would periodically, villagers would step on them, or the cow would step on them and get blown up, which was, the villagers, family's main income was the main asset was that cow,
Wow.
Um, so I went in with an army army demining commission up into the mountains, and a lot of these soldiers would get a leg blown off too if they didn't deactivate the mine properly. So that was a little harrowing too, because I was, you didn't know where you
No,
were
I
kind of
know.
tread. I just went behind the soldiers as they would, but still it was a little,
It's like, yeah, you get blown up first, and then I'll just backtrack. Thank you.
yeah, yeah, it was sad, but a sad story, that one. Another time I had to go into Colombia, and at that point, the guerrilla in Colombia had a huge swath of territory the government has sort of given them in southern Colombia, and that was just theirs to rule, and it was a very
Wow.
controversial move by the government, which now has been rescinded. But at that point, they were doing peace talks in that territory, and me and a couple of other journalists, we flew into the nearest town, and we took a taxi down to the Caguan. It was called San Vicente del Caguan. And then we got stopped, as we're entering. It was like a border point. It was basically a border checkpoint. And the guerrillas, we had to get out, and they checked laptops and everything to see if we were bringing in, I don't know, explosives or God knows what. But I mean, it was fine. But you never know at those kind of searches. You always got to keep your eye in case they're putting something there, or what they're going to, because I mean, they have the power,
Yeah, yeah, it's their land, right? Did you have to stay
Yes.
there overnight, or did you just?
Yeah, we had to, then everything was fine. They checked the laptops and our equipment, and then we went into the town, and yeah, we had to stay one night or 2 nights, I forget. I think it was just one night, but then it was a nightmare getting out of there, actually, because there were a ton of journalists, and the planes were full, and it was
That's
just
insane. I read a story, like I was, trying to practice my Spanish. I read a story like in Duolingo of somebody who had gone into one of those camps, and I'm just like, oh my God, really? It just felt like it wasn't even real. I couldn't believe that they had their own space. They could do all, they had the rule of the land. And so I'm like, I don't know. I would want people to hear the things and, be a journalist, but I think I will probably be too chicken. Don't you have to have some sort of really, you have to have a lot of cojones really to do a job like that?
Yeah, you have to have a sense of adventure. It's not for everyone, and it's not for all journalists either. I've known journalists who would never have done this stuff that I did. So it was a particular breed of reporter that does that kind of stuff. But I think, again, from my background growing up traveling, I did a lot of things that people would be scared to do anyway. When you move to a new country,
Yes.
it's pretty, you have to be pretty gutsy to do that.
Yes.
It takes courage, and it takes sort of, I think, a humility, because you're totally new
Yep.
in the country. You don't know or you might know the language, but not enough, or the customs, So you're always in this sort of, behind phase of catching up or learning. And a lot of people don't like that. They don't like feeling to be a fish out of water type of
Vulnerable,
thing.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly, you know.
Right.
So
It's a vulnerable. Yeah.
did you when you started your journalism career, did you choose these places on purpose, or it was just like you ended up in Latin America? Was it your choice to go after those kind of stories, or was it something that was assigned to you by, the company or what have you?
Well, I chose Latin America because I spoke Spanish. I loved French, but there wasn't much call for French, frankly. I still love
Not much
French.
going on there.
Right, but Spanish, was clearly a thing, and I sort of, became fluent by myself because I love language. As I said, I used to read the Spanish language newspaper in New Jersey every day and look up the words.
Wow.
Couple. I had the grammar basis from high school Spanish, but so that's why I chose Spain and Spanish speaking countries because I knew Spanish already. But um,
Where
yeah,
in,
and
where in Spain did you live?
I lived in Madrid,
Oh,
outside of Madrid in Alcobendas, a little suburb, I guess you would call, and then in Madrid as well, right behind the center city, right behind the Gran Via. It's an
nice.
old,
Oh,
old area.
nice area. Yeah. How was life there? Did you enjoy it?
I did. I thought it was a very nice lifestyle. It was much more laid back than in the United States, and people, they just take life at a different pace.
Yeah.
And people just go and sit in the square in the plaza and have a cup of coffee and sit there and for
Hours
hours,
and nobody bothers
hours.
you. Exactly.
Nobody turns you out. Nobody says move along. Nobody says, hey, you got to buy a meal if you want to
Yeah.
sit here, which is what happens in the United States. But yeah, you just sit there and you just kind of watch life and kids playing around. It's a much more social culture, I think.
Yeah, I
You
call
know,
it
it's
simple pleasures. I'm like, what else do you need? If you can afford to just sit, and it's so relaxing. Your brain actually has a chance to catch up. And how long did you stay in Madrid? And did you want to live, or did you have to leave because of work?
No, I actually taught English there, and I would have stayed, but then I had a boyfriend in Guatemala, so I went and went to. That's where it took me over there. But yeah, it was a lovely lifestyle. It really was.
That's great.
And there
Now,
was so much to see and do too.
oh yes, and it's so convenient to other places. Like I tell people,
Hmm.
I'm like, hey, you can go from Madrid to Portugal for like 30 euros, one way. And it's like, what? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, it makes everything so close. And it's just
Hmm.
wonderful. And in Madrid, I mean, it's just beautiful. You can't beat it. Now, um, let's talk about the books that you've written because you're an accomplished author. And I know, like 4 years ago, your book called Skin of Tattoos. Talk to me about that. How did it come about? It's like gangs, right? It's about gangs in LA. So let me know how that came about.
Well, that came out of reporting I did actually in El Salvador, and this was another, reporting story. I was on the street with gang members.
Oh, and that's
um,
that's really a place to like meet the actual gang members, right?
right. I had a local photographer was working with me on the assignments for a magazine, and we went to some barrio, and I interviewed this guy who was the head of a what they call a clique or a clica, and they had a rope stretched across a dirt road that led into sort of a shanty town. So they would charge a tax or a toll, I guess you could say. Anyone who entered, had to stop at the rope, and they would charge, some money, and that was how they made their money. Then they
Yeah.
would lift up the rope. And so here I was talking to the head guy, when he had this group of, I don't know, 13, 14-year-olds, doing his bidding. And then he leans over to me and he's like, Senora, like, I really need a job. Do you think you could get me a job? A girlfriend and a baby. And I was like, and it just struck me at that moment that that's what he wanted. He didn't really want to be,
Want to be a gang
be a
leader.
gang leader or something. He wanted a job. He wanted like everybody else to
Yeah.
to support his family. And it was just like, so it was interesting, and it was really. And I went into a prison there to interview another gang guy, and then Oh, he actually was deported from the U.S. And then I met some other ones in a group, and they had all been deported from Los Angeles to El Salvador
It's so
because
funny
of their
because
gang crimes.
yeah, I had a few friends on the fringe of like they were in the gang, and actually, I've been guilty, I guess, I've actually, when I worked as a pharmacist, I actually hired one or two. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Show that to everybody in just a second. I actually had a few friends that were, serving time, or ones that were on parole, and even a couple that had gotten deported back to Mexico. But,
Mhm.
everybody always finds their way back. And I actually, at one point, had a couple of people working for me who were serving it, like after they served some time, they had to go wash like police cars like during, so I would let them off, like have a lunch break so they could serve at their time, because I knew it was something they needed to do, because they were having problems finding people that would hire them. And so obviously if that happens, they go back to what they know or what they can
Right.
do. So this way they were able to serve out their time and still get a job. And both of them went on to get their own apartments, condos, and save up for the 401k, all these things. But I think a lot of them need a chance, and they need help. And if you're able to help, then it's great. So show me the book, please, again.
Yeah. So what happened is that that story somehow stayed with me, and the sort of weird. It was a weird consequence of the war in El Salvador, the civil war, that many people had fled for Los Angeles. There's a huge Salvadoran community here,
Oh
and
yeah.
they had started gangs. And then they got deported back to El Salvador, and now, of course, gangs are a huge issue in Central America. So I wanted to write that story, and when I got to Los Angeles, I covered a lot of gang issues too, when as a reporter. Um, so I wanted to write from the inside, what you beyond the tattoos. There's a skin of tattoos, and when you look beyond that, which they put on to make themselves look scary and
Yeah.
intimidating and whatnot, but beyond that, they're just, as I said, it was just this guy wanting a job, to support his girlfriend and his baby. So I kind of wrote that as yeah, that's what I wanted to write. It's about this family, Salvadoran family, and that the main character is the gang members trying to leave the gang, but again, he can't because he has trouble getting a job because of his record and all this stuff. So,
Wow,
um,
very powerful stuff. I want to read it because it sounds so interesting. And I remember there was, I think it was one of the original gang members, the Bloods and the Crips. And I remember reading his life story, and I'm like, it's like I said, it's just sad because it's just wasted lives, but
mhm,
there's no exit. You enter
right,
and there is no exit. And
yeah,
it's just sad. Now you have another one, um, that's called Girl on the
I'm
Brink.
on the brink.
Yeah. And this is about young folks. Now, tell us about that.
Sorry about that. I should have
Oh, no,
been prepared.
that's
Uh,
all right.
Funnily enough, yes, this is Girl on the Brink, and this is a young adult novel. The other one is really an adult novel. I
Yeah.
started out right young adults for teenagers, but I ended up upping the characters' age, and then the characters can do a lot more as adults.
As
Like there's as a teenager, you're still,
it's
you
like
know,
5 o'clock. I gotta go to bed now,
right,
right?
right. So and but this one is for teenagers, and it's about a 17-year-old girl who gets involved with the wrong guy, and he's abusive, physically and emotionally abusive, and she has to get away from him. And this was based on something that I went through myself, not as a teenager, in my early 40s in Miami, when I lived in Miami, and I just felt strongly. Nobody teaches you the red flags of an abusive relationship, and they're very, very present, but if you don't know what they are, you mistake them. Somebody calling you at all hours, and saying, "Oh,
Yeah,
you just think it's flattering. Oh, they just kind of they want to hear my voice. Oh, I just want to
exactly.
hear your voice, Christina. Oh, I just love you so much. Oh, I want to be with you. But really, what they're doing is checking up on you.
Yeah.
They're smothering you with attention
Yes, they
because
are. They are.
they're getting control. It's
Yeah.
all about control. So this is the book about that, and I'm actually just going to release this in Spanish. A friend of mine translated it, and I'm just editing the Spanish version. So that'll be kind of an adventure.
Yeah.
See how that
So
goes.
it's on Amazon, I assume, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
the Spanish version will be on Amazon as well.
right. Yep.
What do you plan on doing in addition to all these things that you've written and all these accolades that you've gotten, which is a lot? What are you planning on next? Are you going to keep on writing? Is there something that's burning a hole in your in your mind that you want to get out there?
Yeah, I have several projects. One I'm working on now is a mystery novel, and it's going to have at the root of it is sexual assault, and it's going to have a true crime podcast in it. And I just finished the second draft of that. So my goal for 2021 is to finish that novel. And I've got various other, smaller projects there. And right now I work as freelance writer too. So I do corporate stuff, speeches, and a lot of speeches for executives or op-eds for executives, that kind of thing. So that pays the bills and leaves me enough time to do my
To do what
passion. Yeah.
That's great. Now, when this year started, oh no, last year now, I forget we're already in 2021. When 2020 started, how was it at the very beginning? And then tell us what happened post pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, it started out, like any other year, really. And I ended up going to the Philippines to speak at a women's summit about Girl on the Brink and about, domestic violence and stuff. And I also mention that I'm a volunteer facilitator. I lead support groups for women at a local shelter here in Santa Monica.
That's
So I
great. In
enjoy
addition
doing.
to like the work you've done, like with prison teenagers, right? And
Hmm.
feel free to
Yeah.
mention that because I forgot to
Okay. Yeah, I was a volunteer creative writing mentor for girls and what they call at-risk youth here in LA and South LA at a sort of a school of last resort for children, for girls teenage girls who hadn't done very well in the school environment. Some of them had been through the justice system. Some of them had been, dropped out because they were pregnant and had babies. Some of them, just didn't had mental health issues, and whatnot. So that was really interesting. And then I also taught creative writing at a prison in Los Angeles County, and that was really fascinating.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
most, yeah, mostly to lifers. But again, not all people would be too scared to go into a prison, and it's like I just wasn't scared to go in there. So a friend of mine
Wow.
introduced me in there, and I ended up like,
After
staying there.
some of the adventures that you've had, hiding under a
Yeah,
car, like in Guatemala, right?
right, right.
Yeah. So doing that, after that, it's like prison. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I thought nothing's going to happen. What are you going to get stabbed? You're inside.
Yeah,
There's
really.
guards around. Yeah,
Wow.
it was silly. So when I came, and that was just the beginning of the pandemic, and I did take a mask on that trip to the Philippines, and I came back, and yeah, and then it just hit, and so I had ordered actually a bunch of books. I had a number of live events of book festivals and signings and things like that. And of course, that all got canceled. So anyone who wants a book can just send me an email on my website, and because I'm trying to sell these. Now I got all these books left.
Mention the website, please. Feel free to mention the website.
Yeah, it's CristinaHoag.com. Just my name, and all the stuff is up there.
Yeah,
And a
along with
contact form.
some of the wonderful books that you've written, and they can find links for everything. And I'll also have it on the YouTube video that goes with this, all your information that they can contact you on if they want to. And the book just sounds so interesting to me. So I think I would really like to read that. Maybe I'm a little too old for the young adult one. I'll look ahead for the next one. So now once the pandemic, like the other day I was looking at a video of what Venice Beach and what Los Angeles looks like now. And for somebody who lives really close to the beach, how does it feel every day when you go out and you see what's going on and the homelessness and the helplessness? How does it make you feel?
Oh, it's terrible. The homeless population. I mean, this is a beautiful place to live. It never rains here. It like rains every few months. I mean, there's a whole other issue, but it's sunny skies and pretty much all the time. And but you go out, and it's a place of enormous wealth. There's Hollywood and just enormous mansions and movie stars. So it's got this side of it, and then on the other very extreme is this horrific homeless problem. And it's just, since I've been here, it's just grown and grown. And now there are actually encampments, like little villages of tents. They actually under overpass, under underpasses of the highways, any little corner that they are, or just on the street, and they have these little tent cities popping up everywhere. And it used to be sort of concentrated in downtown Los Angeles.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's just everywhere, and it's just horrible, and the authorities have not done any kind of job. And voters actually approved an additional tax a couple of years ago to fund homeless solutions, housing, and not much has been done. It's just,
Wow.
it's just a huge failure of society.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the thing, I was like, keeping on YouTube, and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I've only been
Yeah,
here.
yeah. I mean, it's like living in Haiti or something. I mean, this is like
I mean,
Latin American
yeah, you
proportions
can't even
almost.
believe it. I'm like, Gold Gym in Venice Beach, everything is locked up, and I'm just like, camps everywhere in the parking lot, on the streets, just rows and rows and rows, and I'm just like, wow, it's it's
Yeah, it's just,
mind-boggling.
it is mind-boggling. Many of these people are mentally ill. I'd say the most part. I mean, there's just nowhere to put them. There are no, psychiatric hospitals that sort of take people. Now, you can't commit. They've changed laws and everything, and it's a very complicated issue. But basically, people, if they don't want to go into a psychiatric hospital, they don't have to.
Okay, make them, yeah.
They Yeah, it's very difficult to commit someone
Yeah,
even though
it
they
is.
really can't take care of
It's
themselves.
very true. One of my friends, it was actually a teacher, a substitute teacher, one of those last effort schools before they kick you out. And he always hated going to work. But I remember he had a friend who was homeless and chose to be homeless, but she had mental problems. So the police would have to find her every month to inject her with the antipsychotic that lasted a whole month.
Mm,
But I mean, it was
wow.
even going. And, he always helped them because at the end of the month, when it wore off, she would be outside on the balcony just yelling his name. And then he would call the cops. But I'm saying this, it's sad, but this is it. But she didn't want to be helped. But they had to
Right.
do and just get her and do it. So I'm afraid it's just going to get worse. Now, being somebody who has lived in so many countries, where do you think you would be? Like if you had to pick one country, either that you've been or that you want to go to, which one would it be? Like to settle down and say, hey, I'm done. I can write from here.
I don't know, maybe New Zealand. The United States has some serious problems these days. It's really, it's not getting an attractive place to
I,
live. It's no longer really,
I don't believe
yeah,
I think
it's
we're hearing
really,
that a lot. We're hearing
yeah, it's really pretty amazing. It's quite amazing. So, I mean, New Zealand is a nice place to live. It's so far away, though, from the rest of the world. It really is in a remote location. But I love the UK also. That's always felt very homey to me, which again is in the middle of everything in Europe and stuff. So I'd probably love to live somewhere there or in UK
nice.
somewhere.
But the thing is, you can make the decision and say, hey, I've been here, I know what it's going to be like. I've been here, I know what it's going to be like. And so you can make the move if you want. Like a lot of people kind of stop and say they can't. And you're saying, hey, if I want to do it, if I can do it, I will do it. As opposed to the people that say, I want to do it. It's like the fear holds them back or what have you.
Hmm.
But you're open, you've already been through the most dangerous places. I can't imagine there's some place in the world that's like going to be even more dangerous for you, that you would feel is even more dangerous than, being with um, gang members in Colombia and and all these places in El Salvador. I mean, really, I mean that's where it originated, really. So for you, it's like you could pick any place. I mean, obviously able to adapt to wherever you want. But right now, Los Angeles is really still a nice place, and you can still kind of carve out your own thing, and you can keep watching. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff happening. We wouldn't even get into that, but you know, you are making it happen, and that's where you want to be. You were in New Jersey, right? And then you said, hey, I want to be here.
Mhm.
So you have your choice in the US. Would you say Los Angeles was still the best place for you, at least out of all the places that you've lived, and where you are right now is where you would like to be and are?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, to hear like I said, the weather is actually almost the same as that where I grew up in Sydney. I mean, it's almost exactly the same climate, very similar climate, and similar vegetation and the gum trees. Some of the flowers, wisteria and stuff. It reminded me of my childhood in Sydney, and again, I like it here, the weather, and I like. It's just a great, jumping off point. It's on the other side of the United States. The other side is closer to Europe. This is closer to Asia. But it's a good place to be. Yeah. So I think as far as the U.S. goes, I've lived in Boston, New Jersey, and Miami. When I moved back to the U.S. from Venezuela, I went to Miami and I was worked at the Miami Herald for 5 years. Um, I think this is the best for me. Yeah, as far as if I were to, I don't know where I would move in the United States.
That would
Um,
be, that you would
yeah,
say,
that
oh
would be
my God,
better.
this is even better. Yeah, I know. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. It's a great place. And so far for me, I lived there for 20 years. It's the longest place I ever lived also. So like I have really fun feelings, and it's nice to see somebody else that shares the same feeling about it. There's good and bad everywhere, and you've just gotta
Yeah,
so
there's no utopia. There's no
no, there is
perfect place.
not.
There's no utopia.
No,
There
there
really
is
isn't.
not.
But I mean, maybe someplace like Costa Rica also is a lot of expats live there, and
Yes,
apparently very nice lifestyle, very tranquil country, cheap to live in. But again, as you said, I mean, I can kind of live anywhere and make the best of it. It's not the worst thing in the world to live in a less wealthy country. It's
exactly.
there's a lot to be said for that as well. It's still pretty interesting. Yeah.
So where would you say was the cheapest place that you lived out of all those places? Like
I
if
would say Guatemala. I mean, and I'm sure Nigeria was pretty cheap in
not
Zambia,
anymore.
way back then. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, Guatemala was
Yeah,
really cheap.
really.
Yeah,
And the food was great, I'm sure. If you live
yeah, the
in
food was
Miami,
great. I
if
mean,
you lived in Guatemala, El Salvador, you definitely like, Spanish. You like food from Latin America. What's not to like? That's fantastic. Please, Christina, your website, remind me of your website again so that anybody who wants to get in touch with you can go on your website. So it's ChristinaHoag.com, right?
mhm.
Is there any other handles you would like to share?
I'm on Facebook, Instagram. Instagram is Christina Hoag Author. Facebook is also Christina Hoag Author. And Twitter is at Christina Hoag. Yeah.
Great.
So you can find me on and LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. And
Oh, that's a great one. Yes. So please hold up those books again for the people that are watching on video. Girl on the Brink and Skin of Tattoos. I love the cover of Girl on the Brink, especially. It's just really, I mean,
isn't it nice? Yeah.
you're drawn to it, and I hope it's something that can help like kids really know, like you say, figure out what the clues are to like a bad person. Now, how were you able to extricate yourself from this abusive relationship?
With difficulty. It is not easy. It's actually, and again, it's a very complex issue that people don't understand, but you get kind of emotionally attached to this person. And usually you end up or thinking about leaving a lot sooner than you actually do it, or try several times and end up going back and then finally do it. That's often the case. But I finally just ended up, I knew this was, he'd just gone too far, and I just had to bring down the iron curtain, and he was banging at it and they stalking me, and um, ambushing me, and
God.
trying to on electronic. It was like whack-a-mole. He was trying to get in touch with me. He would use third parties. He was calling my family, and use some of his friends to call me. I mean, it was just crazy.
I mean,
And
you were lucky then to get away because some people are not so lucky, you know?
right, right. Some
I
people are not.
interviewed a lady a few weeks ago and she was in the same situation, but she didn't know the guy. He just fixated on her and he had done it to several other people. She literally had to leave the United States and
Wow.
go, yeah, because she couldn't get away. And the people at the shelter told her, they paid for her to like hide out in Miami somewhere. And they said, you really need to go away. In the end, he ended up getting caught and he got 10 years, but by that time she was out of the, she's like, for my safety and the safety of my kid, she needed to go. So you were really lucky that you were able to get away from this person. I mean, anybody who's got a kid,
Hmm.
I would read this book as well, not just for the parents, not just for the young adults. It's probably helpful for parents who don't know how to deal with something that their kid might be going through. So I think that it's a book that they need to check out. And once again, it's called Girl on the Brick, right, by Cristina Hoag. And you can find that on Amazon. And again, I'll have something on the website on Next Bite of Life that will have all of Christina's information if you want to get in touch with her and buy those books. Thank you so much for joining me today, Christina. It's been wonderful. I just
Well, thank
enjoy
you.
stuff and I enjoy listening to your stories, and I could go on for longer because it's really amazing. It's really interesting to me, especially somebody who's led such an exciting life. So I thank you so much for coming on, and everyone listening and everybody watching. Thank you again, and make sure to subscribe to the show if you like what you're hearing or seeing. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next show.